This is Shannon Young with the Springfield Republican and Mass Live. We are live on Capitol Hill in Congressman Richard Neal's office right now. We're going to talk with him about his expectations for tonight's State of the Union address. All right, so Congressman, you want to just walk us through what you're expecting, what you want to hear tonight, and what you're hearing the President's going to talk about?
Well, I assume that he's certainly going to focus attention on the economy, and I think that as he goes down that road, we're all anxious to hear his thoughts and ideas about it, but not to miss the following point. The stock market has been going up since March of 2009. We have now had 9 straight years of economic growth, and I hope that we can address the 6 million jobs that the Department of Labor says goes unanswered every day in America. So I hope talking about community college and internship programs and vocational education might be part of what the President talks about tonight. And I also hope that he's going to give some consideration to leaving the Affordable Care Act alone if he's not going to try to fix it. 100% of the children in Massachusetts are now covered. 97% of the adults in Massachusetts are now covered. Much of the Affordable Care Act has worked the way we intended it to, and it's been this constant assault by Republicans on the Affordable Care Act that have helped create the problem.
Congressman, tonight the President is expected to unveil an infrastructure proposal that he's going to try to push for Congress to pass this year. He's also expected to talk about the changes that he wants to make with trade. These are both issues that you've been focused on and talked about in the last year, if not longer than that, but it's specifically relating to Trump over the last year. What do you think is realistic, and what would you like to see happen?
Well, I hope that he's going to propose a big infrastructure bill and then give some direction as to how he would pay for it. Remember, we're more hemmed in because of the borrowed money that was utilized for the tax cut of $2.3 trillion over 10 years. So I think that the financing aspect of it is going to be one of suspense for all of us, trying to figure out where you go within the framework of the federal budget to pay for what we all agree is a necessity, a big infrastructure program.
And what about on trade?
Well, I think that in the 6th round of the NAFTA renegotiation, there seemed to be some headway that was made, but at the same time, I think that there's an argument that there's a ways to go. I talked to the U.S. trade rep before Montreal meetings were convened last weekend, and he indicated that he thought that we were making some movement in the right direction, but the President's threat during the campaign to move away from all of these negotiations really has not happened. And in fact, if you would recall that at Davos over the past week, he went from saying that we were going to cancel TPP affiliation to saying that he might be interested in revisiting it.
And then another major issue that is on the forefront of Congress right now is figuring out what to do with Dreamers and DACA. You guys face a early March deadline. You have another appropriations deadline coming up. Do you think that if Congress doesn't come to a bipartisan solution on that we're going to see another government shutdown?
Well, I hope not, and I think that we ought to be able to find a common path forward on the issue. The DACA recipients, as you know, some would think that they're but children. Many of them are now in their 20s and 30s. They've been part of the American family and part of the American workforce. And I think that there's a broad acknowledgement that if you want to increase productivity and you want to increase employment opportunities, that immigration reform makes a good deal of sense. And remember the other part of this argument that is oftentimes not receiving the attention that it should. The problem that we have with immigration in America overwhelmingly is people who come on a holiday or vacation visa and stay. That's the real issue. Last year, more migrants returned to Mexico than came here. So I think that the President's argument about immigration probably doesn't square with economic reality.
The President said the other day that he was open to giving these Dreamers a pathway to citizenship. Do you think he's going to make a push for that and for a bipartisan compromise on this issue tonight?
Well, I think that what he might be able to do tonight is to offer an opening statement on what might end up being a compromise, and then I think that our side would respond and recall that he's going to need 60 votes in the Senate to proceed on anything, and there is a bipartisan group of senators, actually they're working as we speak, and then Speaker Ryan has to abandon the Hastert rule and to suggest I'm going to put on the floor the compromise, there will be an opportunity for all of us then to stake out a position by voting for it.
Can you talk about your guest for tonight's State of the Union and the statement that you're hoping to make by inviting him?
Well, Sheriff Kochi is well known as an advocate on the preventive and rehabilitative sides of the opiate crisis, and it relates directly, again, to the idea that we all know somebody or have a family member or somebody down the street who has an opiate addiction. What I think is important to also do is to attach that to the economic realities in which we live. There are right now 2 million Americans on the sidelines of the economy who used to work, who don't work any longer because of opiate addiction. Everybody lives an economy. And I think trying to figure out, as Sheriff Kochi has repeatedly done, to get them into treatment and get them back on their feet is really an important consideration.
And what is your assessment for the State of the Union, in your own opinion, right now?
Well, I mean, I've seen what's happened to the State of the Union during my time in Congress, and I think that more of it's about theater. There used to be this moment when you would actually digest what was being said. You would measure it against the realities of what might be done, but it was aspirational and visionary generally. It is certainly not like that any longer. It is now more about, again, the theater of the State of the Union, and I think that we'd be well served by actually listening and then probing and then offering context to the suggestions that have been made, because after all, there's a vast difference between the verbiage of the State of the Union address and action that would take place in Congress.
All right, thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you, Shannon.